Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock on what is a beautiful spring morning. Pay no attention to forecasts of snow. They are, I'm sure, illusory and must refer to some other part of the world. I am the Reverend Ned White, the interim senior minister here at the congregation, serving with Reverend Jennifer Brower, Reverend Natalie Fenimore, and with Nancy Reed McKee, our ministerial intern. I am delighted to welcome you to this service and to invite you to join us for Unitarian Universalist Cafe, UU Cafe, that will be in the social hall immediately after the service. If you are a person visiting for the first time, please stop by the circular welcome desk and pick up a voucher for a free lunch. Who says there ain't no free lunch? Here there is, so please to do that. There is a free spirits program, a canvas painting party today for kindergarten through fourth graders from 11 to 12:30 in room 15. So as it is said, be there or be square. Free spirits for fourth graders, the kindergarten through fourth graders. I am delighted to welcome as our preacher this morning the Reverend Kathleen McTigue, who is the director of the UU College of Social Justice, a joint program of the UU Service Committee and the UUA. Prior to accepting this position in 2012, she served as a parish minister for 25 years, first in North Carolina and then in New Haven, Connecticut. She currently resides in Boston, Massachusetts. Kathleen made a presentation about the UU College of Social Justice experiential learning programs yesterday in the Beach Ballroom. Our Beach program has supported the UU Service Committee for decades and the UU College of Social Justice since its inception. So we are delighted to have Kathleen with us, and I think you could give her a rousing round of applause. With Kathleen is Cassandra Ryan, who is Vice President and Chief Development Officer at the Service Committee. Is she in the room? There she is. Yes, she's there. Welcome, Cassandra. Lovely to have you here. Both of them will be staying for the UU Cafe to answer any questions you might have. And we will also have a UU Service Committee table in the social hall with information about joining as individual members. We support the UU Service Committee through our Beach program, but it is also possible and desirable, I think, for us to support the UU Service Committee individually. So you can join as an individual supporter, and just as a little incentive, in 2015, we had 146 supporters in the congregation, from this congregation, and at the present time, we have only 66. So it would be delightful and wonderful if we could close that gap, and you will hear about some of the work of the Service Committee, and I think it will touch your heart and hopefully inspire you to become a partner with them in this important work. I should say in the Department of Full Disclosure that I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the UU Service Committee. So I do have an interest, although it is not a self-interest based on any benefit that accrues to me. Today is the last time to sign up for the lookbook, the photo directory project that Barbara Dilsner is working up, and that will be a sign-up table in the lobby, so please sign up for that. Those picture sessions start tomorrow. The Dan Pratt Nonette is offering a spectacular jazz concert here this afternoon at 1:30. You will not want to miss it. Information about that is in your orders of service. There are a bunch of interesting programs this week: an Equal Pay Day presentation at 2 on Tuesday, Al Gore's film sequel, an Inconvenient sequel, at 7 on Tuesday. On Thursday, a program about the Pentagon Papers and the role of this congregation in publishing with Beacon Press, helping to support the publication of the Mike Gravel edition of the Pentagon Papers back in the 1970s. Joan Maneri, the director of the UU Beach program, and I will be giving that program on Thursday at 7:30. Next Sunday, Nancy Reed McKee will be preaching, and we will also have a dedication of bricks in the Remembrance Garden immediately following next week's service, weather permitting, if we don't have snow. Other announcements are in your order of service. And before we turn to the rest of the items in the service, I'm aware that we have a very special birthday to acknowledge this week. Having just celebrated her 74th wedding anniversary, Ronnie Arend is also celebrating her 94th birthday. So let's join the choir in singing happy birthday to Ronnie. I would like us all to follow in her excellent example and live forever. In the midst of realizing our hopes and dreams, we are engaged on a pledge campaign inviting people to renew their membership. I would like to invite longtime member Richard Bach forward for a brief testimonial about why he's happy to renew his membership and pledge support for this congregation for the year that begins July 1. Richard.
Thank you, Ned. 56 years and counting. Good morning, everyone. I have been asked to tell you what UUCSR means to me, and it has been at times difficult to comprehend that more than half of a century has gone by since the day I signed the book and became a member of the North Shore Unitarian Society. I actually came to Unitarian Universalism 2 years earlier when, in search for a new religious home, I arrived at South Nassau Freeport congregation and met their beloved minister, the Reverend Lon Ray Call. 2 years later, the Plandome congregation became my religious and spiritual home, and the Reverend Harold Hadley became my minister. Yes, he is the minister for whom Hadley House is named. In 1982, I met Claire, and the rest is history. As I reflect on my life at Plandome and Shelter Rock, my religious journey these past 5.5 decades has evolved slowly. Music has helped me get through some very good times and some very difficult times. I have found an important family here, specifically our wonderful choir. These men and women have been a part of the glue that makes Shelter Rock important to me, and I hope to you. We are family. We celebrate good times and hold each other in tough times. This is why Claire and I pledge. UUCSR has offered many leadership opportunities. I have been chair or member of a long list of committees. NSUUCSR, I have been your president, served on search committees, our board of trustees, our Veach Board of Governors, our Hadley House Board. These are some of the reasons why I pledge. I am serving on the Unitarian Universalist Commission on Social Witness, which is a national social justice arm. And again, this is why we pledge. Finally, and a key important reason why I am committed to UUCSR is our ministry. They have played a central role in my appreciation for our congregation these past 56 years, starting with the Reverend Harold Hadley, David Osborne, who married Claire and me, Ken Brown, Chris Wetzel, Bob Reed, Barry Andrews, Paul Johnson, Ned White, Jennifer Brower, Natalie Fenimore, and a host of interns and interims. All of our ministers have given me spiritual strength and guidance and made me proud to generously pledge to Shelter Rock. I thank you for letting me share this part of my life at this special place with you. I hope your journey will be as spiritually and religiously rewarding as mine has been. This is why we pledge and contribute financially to support our congregation. I hope this is why you will make your pledge even today. As the Reverend Mark Morrison Reed said in the Selma Awakening, quote, "What people truly value is better revealed by what they support financially than by what they profess," unquote. Thank you, and blessings all.
Our campaign is one of one-on-one conversations with people, so when people communicate with you that they would like to meet, I hope that you will say yes and share with them some of your hopes and aspirations for this congregation, as well as renewing your membership. And now it is time to celebrate the congregation that we are and the relationships we have by greeting one another warmly. Please do so.
Good morning. Good morning. So pleased to be with you. I was here in this room preaching a sermon in 2013, in the very first year of the College of Social Justice. So I'm so pleased to be with you again. We breathe the common wind of the earth, no matter where we live, who we love, what language we speak. We drink the common water of the earth, no matter our skin color, how long we live, the coverings we drape on our forms. We follow the common paths of the earth, no matter our beliefs, how far we move from home, the gold that we carry, or its lack. May we live from these truths, our hearts open to the holiness all around us, and our hands turned always to the common good. Let us worship together.
As I read these words from Marta Flanagan, which are the words used by our small group ministry this month, thank you very much, Betty, Kathleen will be lighting our chalice. We gather this day, we come in search of life's meaning. All of us have moments of weakness and times of strength. All sing songs of sorrow and love. May our worship bring us strength along the way. In the presence of the sacred, may we come to know our true selves, finding a fresh impulse to love and to do good. Please rise as you are able and willing to sing hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life, number 86 in the gray hymnal. Please remain standing for our words of affirmation printed in the order of service and our song of affirmation that follows. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. Quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. This do we affirm and covenant with each other.
Every
Please be seated. Say amen, somebody. All right, I think we can just stop the service now. We've been there. Wow. Thank you. Spring is a season of renewal. We can actually see it happening out this window when we observe the return of color to trees and plants, the reemergence of life in all its many wondrous forms, reminding us of the extravagance of creation and the generosity at the heart of the universe. In the spirit of this glorious season, let us share from the abundance with which we have all been blessed to support the program life of this congregation. The ushers will please come forward.
Today's reading is taken from a poem by Ted Loder called Breathe Restlessness into Me. Thank you for everything that I forget are gifts, not rights. Forgive me for all the grievances I remember too well. Save me from the self-pity, the self-seeking, the fat-heartedness which is true poverty. Make me wide-eyed for beauty and for my neighbor's need and goodness, wide-willed for peacemaking and for confronting power with the call to compassion. Match my appetite for privilege with the stomach for commitment. Teach me the great cost of paying attention, that I may know I am always on holy ground. Breathe into me the restlessness and courage to make something new, something saving, and something true, that I may understand what it is to rejoice.
We've reached that point in our service where we invite you to come forward to light a candle of joy or celebration, of sorrow or grief, of compassion or hope, of gratitude or peace. Whatever is in your heart, come forward now. Let us enter into a period of prayer. Gracious God of many names and no name, we gather today in appreciation of all these lighted candles representing events and thoughts and longings and anxieties that are real and present to those in this room. May we be present to one another in ways that deepen our connections and make it easier for each of us to bear our burdens and to persevere through another week. We gather today remembering the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years ago this past week, the loss of intellect, wisdom, courage, and vision that his death has meant for us. We are grateful for the legacy of his thinking and action for racial, economic, and social justice, and his bold witness for peace in a time of war. May we ensure that his legacy lives on for the next 50 years in our own collective activism. We gather today remembering the Passover story, which we told at last week's service and entered into at last night's Seder here in our social hall. As the leader said last night in recollecting and reimagining this story, may we learn to appreciate more deeply the freedom we enjoy. May we also learn to care about all those who are not yet free. May we join in working for the day when all people everywhere shall be free from tyranny, from poverty, from war, and from hatred. Help us to envision such a world as the first step toward building it for our children and our children's children. Gracious Spirit of many names and no name, help us imagine.
Any honest preacher will tell you that the words we sweat over for our sermons are meaningless in the context of worship without the wind that sails us along in the form of music. So thank you so much for that beautiful music. Some of you may know the name Brian Stevenson as the author of the book Just Mercy, which was our common read for our denomination last year, and he also spoke at our General Assembly in New Orleans last year. Stevenson often tells the story about how he discovered his life's purpose, which is advocating for the lives and the well-being of men living on death row in this country. At the heart of his telling is an encounter, his first meeting with a condemned prisoner in a maximum security prison when Stevenson was just a nervous young law student. He spent hours with the man that he was there to see, and at the end of that time found himself feeling deeply connected to the man, to his struggle, and to his story. As the guards led that prisoner back to his cell, heavily chained, pulling on his chains as though he were an animal, he suddenly threw back his head and began to sing the old hymn, Higher Ground. And Stevenson was left behind in that meeting room, hearing this anomalous sound of this condemned prisoner as his voice echoed down the corridor back to his cell, singing, I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I'm onward bound, Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. In telling the story, Stevenson says, I suddenly knew that my journey to higher ground was tied to his journey. If he didn't get there, I wouldn't get there either. That's what proximity does for us. When people get proximate to the problems and the things that they care most deeply about, it changes them. And he concluded by saying, we run from problems, most of us, but sometimes we have to run to the problem. Sometimes we have to run to the problem. I was struck by Stevenson's framing the first time I heard him say that, because for nearly 6 years now, my work at the UU College of Social Justice has been to build programs that help people run to the problems. Like Stevenson, we know that proximity changes us. The most powerful kind of learning in which we can ever engage, the kind that sometimes literally changes our lives, comes to us not from books or movies or lectures, but rather through some face-to-face direct encounter with some part of the world's reality we had not understood until that moment. And so we put proximity, that direct firsthand encounter, at the heart of all of our programs through the College of Social Justice. A small group from this congregation actually experienced that with us several years ago, traveling with us on a program to Haiti. And I've spoken with Claire about the possibility of a group from this congregation traveling with us again, hopefully in the coming year, to another location. So I hope you'll spend some time investigating our website if you're curious about our programs and the ways in which they bring us closer to the problems. But today what I want to dive into a little bit more is the power of proximity, because this idea is foundational not just to the College of Social Justice, but also to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee in its urgent work for human rights all over the world. The concept of proximity is also foundational to two of our Unitarian Universalist values that I believe hold the beating heart of our faith. And those two are foundational for the UU Service Committee and all of its work. The first of these two core values of ours is our interdependence, our connectedness, not only with one another or with people of our culture or color or nation, but with all people all around the world. Unitarian Universalism tends to talk about this truth with the image of the interdependent web. And it's an easy image for us to hold in our mind's eye because we have each seen those marvelous orb-weaving spider webs first thing in the morning, shining in a meadow with dew or shining in the eave of our porch. But that interdependent web of our faith, or that our faith speaks of, is much more complicated than the physical web so familiar to us. And it is not always bright and shining. Really challenging questions lie along its often tangled strands. One of the best ways I have ever heard those questions referenced was by a Latin American priest by the name of Gustavo Gutierrez. Gutierrez taught that the two most important questions that people of any faith can ask ourselves in order to live with integrity actually appear in one of the early creation stories in the book of Genesis. It is the ancient story that tells about the first act of human violence, when Cain murders his brother Abel and then runs off and hides in shame and confusion. In the story, God comes looking for Cain, and he asks first, "Where are you?" And then he asks, "Where is your brother?" Gutierrez says those same two questions are falling into our lives all the time, like invisible rain. Where are we? Where are our brothers, our sisters? Where are we in the tangled matrix of privilege and power through a sheer accident of birth? Where are our siblings, so often caught on the raw side of that same matrix through an accident of birth? Attending well to those two core religious questions is not an easy practice, but this is what UUSC does by the nature of its work. It asks us to be mindful of our place in the web, mindful of who those strands connect us to, visibly and usually invisibly, and of how our circumstances are also connected. Places of abundance and safety sometimes depend on their being places of scarcity and danger. And also, those of us who live in abundance and safety have an urgent mandate to attend as well as we can to those who live in want and peril. We are connected. The second core value of Unitarian Universalism on which UUSC bases its work is the one that declares the wholeness of every single person, what we often refer to in our purposes and principles as inherent worth and dignity. This is actually a radical assertion. It is the radical assertion that no human being's life is inherently worth more than another's, and that no person, regardless of circumstances, regardless of deeds, is disposable. No person is disposable. In this political moment through which we are all living, our country and our leaders are in urgent need of being reminded of this truth. You may remember that not long ago, in a conversation about restricting immigration, President Trump declared some countries of the earth to be, well, let's say, outhouse countries, though he used a much cruder term. Words are incredibly important. Words carry the power to shape our thoughts, and our thoughts shape our actions. We make sense of this complicated world through the stories we tell and the images those stories evoke. So when a whole nation is labeled a latrine, a toilet, an outhouse, a sewer, what does that make the people who call that country home? It makes them completely disposable. They can be excluded, they can be flushed, they can be forgotten. In January, just a few months ago, I spent a week in the middle of one of those countries, Honduras. For years running now, little tiny Honduras has had the highest murder rate in the world. It is plagued with the massive entwined problems of deep poverty, a repressive military-backed state, and drug cartels often linked to the state. The long roots of each one of those problems wind their way right back to our own doorstep here in the United States of America. For more than a century, the United States has intervened in Honduras in ways both large and small, and not ever on the side of democracy. It started with the priority that we put on profits for the United Fruit Company well over a century ago. Honduras was literally the first banana republic, and it was our own country, through the United Fruit Company, that made it so and named it so. Honduras is surely at the top of President Trump's disparaging list of latrine countries. It is also a stunningly beautiful place, filled with equally beautiful human beings, people who rock their children to sleep, laugh over the fence with their neighbors, run late in getting to work, grumble about the traffic, tap their feet in time to the music, worry about paying their bills. People, in other words, exactly like you and me. Except that there is a little thread of desperation running through each of their days, because violence, both random and precisely targeted, is an absolute fact of their lives. As you might imagine, I was not in Honduras for vacation. I was there in response to an urgent request for faith leaders to come stand with the people in the face of a stolen election. I was there because some basic human rights are being violated daily, and human rights leaders, including some Jesuit priests, are receiving escalating death threats. I was there because I believe in the power of proximity to change lives. And I was there because UUSC is there, supporting some of the bravest people I have ever met as they stand up against immense forces that would deny their basic human rights, including, finally, their right to live. The week was dense with experiences that, honestly, I am still processing. We witnessed many demonstrations at which, over the last few months, more than 40 people have been shot and killed, at which the military massively outnumbered protesters. The soldiers wore camouflage uniforms with no identifying insignia, and also wore black kerchiefs across the bottom of their faces, leaving nothing visible but their eyes, chillingly reminiscent of the death squads from an earlier era. These soldiers are armed and uniformed and trained by the United States of America. We held a candlelight vigil in front of the U.S. Embassy and listened to prayers from some of the priests now living under death threats because they stand up for human rights. The 300 or so Hondurans who turned out for that nighttime vigil greeted us with tears and embraces and told us that but for our presence, they could not have come out. The soldiers would have violently dispersed them on sight. On my last day, I met for 2 hours with a dozen women from the UUSC partner group called Foro de Mujeres, or the Women's Forum. It is a rather bland name for exceptionally dangerous and courageous work. One of their core projects is accompaniment. When someone is forced to leave their home because of escalating violence or threats, these women help them find safe haven within Honduras or out of it. And when someone seeking asylum disappears, as so often happens on that perilous migrant path toward the United States, they accompany families on the agonizing search for answers. Here is the beauty and the power of how UUSC, your service committee, acts on the power of proximity. It does not just support the extraordinary work of women like Foro de Mujeres. It goes way beyond that support to help all of us connect the dots. You may have at some point in the past heard that metaphoric story about a village where people go out every day and pull bodies out of the river that runs in front of their village, until finally one day someone says, shouldn't some of us go upstream and figure out why it is people keep falling into the river to begin with? Using that metaphor, UUSC places itself at multiple points along the river. So in the example of Honduras, we go all the way upstream. We amplify and expand the work of those on the front lines who are fighting for conditions that will allow people to live safely and abundantly in the place they call home. But we also support groups in Mexico that shelter refugees when they've been hurt along the migrant route or expelled from the United States. We lead advocacy here in the United States to protect people when they request the asylum to which they are entitled under international law. And through the College of Social Justice, we support congregations through the discernment process, offering sanctuary to migrants and into ongoing accompaniment of migrant communities as they face a far harsher reality today than they have in the past. In all of these ways, UUSC harnesses the power of proximity. Because we come toward a problem, toward an injustice in our world, and as we come close enough to hear the voices, close enough to see the faces, to look into the eyes, we wake up on a new level. We recognize that these people, so impacted by these injustices, are not, after all, strangers. They are our kin. And in recognizing kinship, something starts to shift within us. We become more determined, more articulate in our indignation, more willing to step outside of our comfort zones and take some risks. We join our efforts with those who are on the front lines, and together, in the words of our reading, we begin to create something new, something saving, and something true. UUSC belongs to all of us, as you heard Ned explain during the announcements, and it needs all of us, especially during the political time through which we are now living. UUSC does not receive any support from the UUA, from the denomination, nor from any government. It depends on people like you who join as individual members, because when you do, completely aside from your financial support, you yourselves are stepping into proximity. You are agreeing to be contacted to help with that advocacy work here in the United States and add your voices, your efforts to ours. Collectively, this congregation has an extraordinarily proud history of deep support for UUSC, both through the VEACH program and through your generous congregational grants for very specific projects. Your support helped create the College of Social Justice and all of the programs that it still sustains. In this incredibly perilous political moment, the mission that you help UUSC to fulfill has not been so critically important since its founding during World War II. Back then, nearly 80 years ago, we fought to save lives and protect the rights of people made refugees by German fascism. Today, we fight to save lives and protect the rights of people made refugees by our policies in Central America, made refugees by the war in the Middle East, made refugees by rising sea levels. Our own government is implicated in all of these flows of human suffering, which makes our commitment as US citizens that much more critical. When I was getting ready to leave Honduras, one of the priests whose activism puts him at risk of death said to me, "Sister, I can tell you this 100 times, and it would still be 100 times too few. You and the others who have joined us here this week have been like a new lung, breathing alongside us when we could no longer breathe at all. You have been the very air that sustains us. Do not forget how your lives are joined to our lives. Your very breath is a part of our sustenance." So I say to you here, Shelter Rock, and those of you who become members of UUSC, represent the solidarity that sustains so many lives around the world. Do not forget how your lives are joined to their lives, now and forever. Amen. I invite you to rise as you are willing and able and join in our closing hymn, Guide My Feet, number 348. May we turn hearts and minds to the needs of a small and struggling planet. May we listen well to the call that is ours to hear, put our hands to the work that is ours to do, and let our spirits flourish in the blessing of a life worth its living. Go in peace, believe in peace, create peace. Amen.